Hi, my name is Wendy Winder, and I am the Subrecipient Monitoring Manager for the Utah Office for Victims of Crime. My role is to do the regular monitoring of all awards through UOVC, which is done outside the day-to-day work that you do with your grant analyst. So today I just want to briefly go over these requirements as they relate to our state grants so that you kind of know what to expect and what will be coming for when we do these monitoring events. So monitoring can be several types of things that are done to ensure compliance with certified assurances and grant conditions. It can be done in the form of desk reviews, site visits, technical assistance, best practice suggestions, connecting with other resources, and things of that nature. Desk reviews are when we send you an email to your primary point of contact requesting documentation to support what you reported and billed for a certain time period. You'll send that information to us by the deadline that we gave you, and we review that information in our offices, which is why it's called the desk review. And then we send out a report at the conclusion of that. A site visit is usually when we schedule a time with you to come on site to your location, when we spend some time going over the grant related topics and see how things are going. We've mirrored our monitoring after the requirements for federal grants, but we've just applied the ones that we felt were most crucial to helping you be successful in the management of your grant award, since there are more requirements for the federal awards than there are for the state awards. So how do we determine what monitoring to do? Each year, the Utah Office of Victims of Crime monitoring team completes a risk assessment for each agency that we monitor. That's mostly done with information we gather from our own sources and also from a Google survey that asks you a few questions about things that are internal to your agency. This could be things like how much experience your programmatic and financial staff has, what your turnover has been like, any problems that you've encountered, and things of that nature. So once we input all of that information, it assigns a number to each agency, and that's level 1, 2, or 3, basically. And then the type and frequency of monitoring that we do is based on the outcome of that assessment. We can choose to monitor more than the minimum that is assigned through that number, but we can't do less. And so, especially if you're out of town and we're in the area, we might want to stop in and see how things are going, since we don't get to interact with some of the rural areas as often. You can expect a formal desk review somewhere between once every 1 and 3 years, depending on your risk level or your needs. We're always happy to come out in between formal reviews as well and help when we can. Keep in mind that any agency in their first 2 years of receiving UOVC awards is automatically put into that higher category where we monitor you at least once a year for those 2 years. And this is mainly to help you start off strong and to catch any issues before they become long-term problems. So what do we look at? When we do a desk review, we ask for the documentation to support your billing for at least a 3-month period that we will provide to you. So we'll say we need billing for July, August, and September of 2024, or whatever that time period is. And then we'll give you a date that we need that documentation by. And then we review that information and get back to you with questions and things like that. So I want to give you some examples of the types of documents that we will need for each of the categories in the billing ledger. And of course, this is going to be based on what's in your grant. So if you're only salary and benefits in your grant, that's the only part that applies to you. But I'm going to go briefly over some of the others just so that you're clear on what it is that you need to maintain. Let's see. So for salary and benefits. So we're going to need timesheets for salary. And those timesheets need to indicate what time was spent for the grant activities and what time was spent for other activities. So if you have multiple roles or only part of your job is doing the grant eligible activities and then part of your job is doing something else, then you would need to track the date and the number of hours on that particular day that you completed the grant activities. Doesn't have to be complicated. Each day just needs to have the total number of hours worked and how many of those were devoted to your grant. And if you have an electronic timekeeping system, they can build in if they build in a code for you, you can just code them that way and that will keep track of it. But if they don't, which a lot of agencies don't, then you can keep track of that yourself. You can keep an Excel document, a Word document, anything that will help us see, I billed for 50% of my salary and here's showing that 50% of my time was devoted to the grant activities. The other thing that you're going to want for both salary and benefits is something showing what was actually paid by your agency to the funded employee. So the easiest way I've seen to do this is to use payroll summaries and benefit summaries that you can get from finance. They pull a report straight out of their electronic system, and it tells them exactly how much was paid for each different item for the time period. So if they put in July 1 to September 30th, it will tell them how much they paid an employee during that time frame. And then that helps us align that with your timesheets. And that's also where you're going to get your numbers to know how much to put in the billing ledger as well. So I would ask finance for that and use their numbers. Let's see. So salary and benefits, those are actually pretty simple. It is where we have the most errors, but they are pretty easy if you use your finance department to help with that. You don't want to include any employee paid benefits. It should be company paid benefits only. Okay, so for travel and training, for mileage reimbursement or per diem, you need to have something that shows why it was needed. So if you went to a training or something related to the grant, or you had some travel related to the grant, so you're going to need to have something that shows the purpose, the date, and the amount that was reimbursed. And you'll need to show something showing, one, that you did the reimbursement. So your agency usually will have a reimbursement form that you fill out saying, here's how much you owe me, and this is why, and any receipts that go along with that. And then we also need to see that that money was reimbursed. So copies of sorry, I just lost the word, a profit and loss statement that shows that money went out, or it could be it might even be on your payroll summary showing that X amount was reimbursed. So we'll just ask for those things there. For other training and travel, things like hotels, airline tickets, registration fees, anything like that, you're just going to maintain the actual receipt showing what was paid, what the dates were, what it was for. So it might be a hotel stay during the Moab Swabo or something to that effect, and you're just going to maintain your actual receipts for those. I suggest scanning those in, but we'll get to all of that in just a minute. On contracted fees, so if you are paying for contracted fees, we'll need to see a copy of the contract, which should be uploaded into our grants management system, and we can try and pull it from there. If it's not, we'll ask you to send us that. And then we need all the invoices and proof of payment to those contractors. So if you're contracting for therapy or for nursing services or whatever it is, and they send you an invoice saying, here's what I performed and here's how much you owe me, you're going to show us that document as well as a profit and loss or something to that effect that shows that you did make the payment to those individuals. Supplies and equipment, pretty straightforward. So any supplies that are purchased with grant funds, you'll need to just keep the receipt so that the grant can reimburse you for that. I would keep electronic copies of all invoices and receipts, and you should be just fine with that. The other category is very similar to supplies and equipment, but this category can cover so many different types of expenses. So my advice on this one is just maintain any documentation related to these expenses. If it's paying for emergency expenses for victims, you're going to want to have something showing that that amount was authorized and what was paid, the receipt for what you bought, things of that nature. So, what if I made a mistake? You will. Everybody does. And we're well aware of that, and it's nothing to panic about. So at some point, everyone will make a mistake in their management of their grants, and we're always happy to work with you to correct any errors. If you discover on your own, like outside of a monitoring event, you're reviewing things and you find that you made an error, you overbilled for something, or misreported your numbers, something to that effect, just let your grant analyst know. They will work with you to get that corrected. Whether it's billing or programmatic, they're the ones who are going to be able to help you with that. If during a monitoring event, Caden is our other subrecipient monitor, if we find an error or something we believe is an error, we will send you an email or call you or something and say, this is what I'm seeing. Can you help me understand, am I missing something? Is there documentation I don't have? And we'll try and clear that up. If it turns out that you did make an error, again, it's usually fairly simple fixes. You'll coordinate either with us or your grant analyst, depending on what needs to be corrected to get that done. When we find them during a monitoring event, we have to generate a report at the end of each monitoring event. And so in there, it will just has this category called area of concern. And it just lists out, this is what we found, and here's what we need to do to correct it. And then after you receive that report, you usually have 3 or 4 weeks. We'll set a date in there. Usually have 3 or 4 weeks to send us a response saying, this is what I've done to correct this or to prevent this from happening again, or here's what we plan to do. So you don't have to have everything fixed before you send us in your response. You just have to have a plan in place saying, next month we're going to do a training with all of our staff to ensure that they understand what's allowable and what's not on grant paid time, or things of that nature. So then we'll follow up with you a few months later. We'll check in and say, during our monitoring, we found this, and you said you were going to do X. We're just checking in to see if you were able to complete that or how things are going related to whatever that error was. So that's kind of the general what you can expect if an error was made. Let's see. I would say the only other thing to really keep in mind related to mistakes that you made is, as long as errors are made in good faith, you thought you were doing the right thing, and then there was no intent to intentionally make those errors, then we'll work it out, and there's no reason to panic. It happens to everyone, and it doesn't need to be a big deal. We'll just work with you to get it fixed. So don't let the monitoring scare you. It really shouldn't. We want you to just learn and grow from it. It's what the intent really is, to make sure you're successful. So how can I prepare for a monitoring event? I just have some suggestions of things that you can do along the way as you're managing your grant that will make your monitoring go much smoother. In an ideal world, I would send you an email saying, please send me documentation for Q2 of fiscal year 24 to support the billings. And you should be able to drag a folder from your desktop into the email and send it right back to me and have everything in there. In an ideal world, but however, things do get missed and things go missing, and so we understand that as well. So here are a few of my suggestions. One is keep your own backup copy of all invoices, receipts, reimbursement forms, any documentation that is related to what you're billing. Sometimes things get lost in translation. Sometimes they fall into a black hole in the auditing department or in the finance department, and it can be time consuming to get those things. So when let's say you come back and you have a hotel receipt and you turn in that receipt with to finance to justify the payment, or with your P-card summary or whatever it is, I would scan it in and save a copy in a file on your computer. My best advice is have a folder that is made for your backup documentation, and then every quarter in there, you've got Q1, Q2, Q3, and before you bill, when you're going to fill out your billing ledger to know how much you're going to bill, you want to open up that file and go through everything in there. And if you had an expense that you were going to bill for and you can't find documents to support it, don't bill for it until you've found it. If in February you're missing an invoice for a hotel, don't bill for that hotel until you found that invoice, even if that means that you bill it in the following quarter. The worst case scenario is that you bill for that expense, and then when we ask for the documentation, you don't have it and you have to pay that back. So we're trying to avoid those errors being made in the first place. You have to have documentation to support all of those billings. So go through that folder every quarter and make sure that there's documentation to support your billing, what you're asking for. So salary and benefits, again, those are the areas with the most errors in billing, usually because people do their own calculations rather than use the work that your finance team has. So for an example, an advocate might say, during this last quarter, I worked 200 hours towards the grant and I make $18 an hour. Hopefully it's more than that, but, and so they multiply the number of hours by their rate, and that's the amount they bill. The problem is that when your finance department runs reports, it's going to be based on dates that things were paid out, not the dates that work was completed. So since payroll usually comes a couple weeks after work is completed, if you say, well, what was I paid from January 1st to September 30th, it's going to go based on the pay period, even though that means your timesheets will go back a couple weeks. That tends to be the cleanest way. When you try to do month end, like month beginning to month end or quarter beginning to quarter end for your timesheets and bill that amount, inevitably we find that there are problems. Hours might get mistakenly billed in 2 different billings because they try to switch halfway through. So there tends to be a lot of complications with that. My suggestion is every time you go to bill, have finance run that salary and benefits report. Save a copy of your timesheets, throw it all in that file, and bill based on the amounts that are on those forms, because they're going to have the accurate amounts that says exactly what their system paid out. So that's my suggestion. It does also mean that you're not going to have the same amount billed every quarter, even if you're 100% salary billed or paid by the grant. Some quarters are going to have more pay periods than others just because of the way that pay dates fall. And so that amount is not going to be separate. So you don't want to take your award amount and split it in 4 and bill a quarter of it every quarter, because it will not be accurate. Let's see. Third suggestion, so double check your numbers on your performance reporting. I commonly see that a number was entered into one box that should have gone in another, or numbers are transposed, things of that nature. And it's a lot more difficult to go back and try and fix that later than it is to just take a second or third look. So go through and enter your numbers, and then go back through and check them side by side to make sure that they're all entered into the correct box and that numbers weren't transposed. I don't know if anyone else has that issue with transposing numbers, but a lot of us do. So something I would double check. My last piece of advice is you cannot ask too many questions. We actually mean that. We don't just say, call me if you have questions or email me if you have questions. We actually want you to reach out so that we can help you with situations before errors are made, before they become a problem. You should have the opportunity to meet with your grant analyst at least quarterly. I know that they have quarterly meetings that they set up that you can go in and talk with them about your grant and have questions answered. But if in between those meetings, if questions come up, or you're not sure if something is allowable, or you're not sure if a certain expense is covered in your grant, always reach out before. The last thing you want to do is go buy an expensive computer or something just to find out that the money is not actually in your budget for that item, and then you've got to explain why there's no funding to cover that to your agency. So always reach out and ask questions just to clarify. In your first couple of years, it's such a big learning curve to manage grants, and we are well aware of that. So we really want you should be reaching out regularly. You should have a lot of questions. If your grant analyst goes 4 or 5 months without hearing from you in your first couple of years, they're probably going to be really worried about what's going on, or do you think you know more than you know, things of that nature. So a year from now, you'll come upon a situation that you haven't dealt with before, and you're going to need to reach out and say, here's what's going on. Can you help me explain, what I can and can't do with the grant? Let's see. So a couple other things that you can expect from our monitoring team. So again, there's 2 of us. There's Caden and I. We do a few other things outside of that standard monitoring, and they're all related to compliance in some form. So part of our monitoring is that we ensure that all agencies have the policies that they're required to have under the certified assurances and grant conditions. And some of those policies have very specific requirements that are really only applicable to your UOVC grant. So there are going to be times that we say, show me your policy on what happens in the event of an actual or imminent breach of personally identifying information. Well, part of the requirement for that is that your policies say that you notify your UOVC grant analyst within 24 hours of becoming aware of an actual or imminent breach of PII. Your agency as a whole is, of course, not going to have that policy, and we don't want them to. So when situations like that arise, that you need to create a procedure, we don't want you to go back and change your agency policies, but just let us know that you need that done, and I can give you examples of what most agencies do in those situations. And all you're going to need to do is create a policy specific to just the grant program. We can show you that language and how that works, so you don't have to go through and have your boards or your cities or counties or whatever it is actually change policies that way. So don't let those panic you, but we will reach out, especially in the first year of your grant, and say, these are the policies we need. Let's work to get those on place. We mark off that we have them for you, and then we'll just get updates in the following year. So it won't be as much work. Let's see, other things that we do. We do a lot of technical assistance. So anytime you have questions, you need information on certain topics, we're happy to come out or virtually meet with you, or phone calls or whatever works, and help with that. We will reach out for annual or one-time requirements. So every July, you'll usually see a couple of emails from us saying, please complete this survey. And that's usually things like the risk assessment. So you'll see something come in saying, please complete this on the risk assessment, or we might ask a question about any outside monitoring that you've had. So like if a private firm comes in and monitors your whole agency, we're going to ask if anything like that has been done. And so they're usually 5-6 questions at the most. Very simple and should not take more than 5 minutes to complete. If there's ever issues with those, just let us know. If you have questions, let us know. But you will occasionally see things like that from us as well. If you're ever unsure about whether something is legitimate, or if you're unsure on how to complete it, me and Caden both have our phone numbers in our emails, and it should be a utah.gov or email address. So you can always call us, email us, anything like that to verify that you're receiving a legitimate request. Let's see. So that's everything. Hopefully this was helpful information to prepare you for what to expect. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. When you do receive a request for information from us, if you're uncomfortable, if you're not sure what to do, just let us know and we're happy to walk you through it. We understand some people feel a little intimidated by the process, and we are more than happy to help as much as we can to get all of your information together. So thank you for your time, and I hope that you all have a good day.